Pankana Hambaka Yoshin Popada Mini Ura Wanka Yoshibu Yoshankuru Anokon Rospa Nokon Aimbo Nokon Roni Shinam Popa Shabakin Shinam Popa Shabakin Shinam Popa Shabakin Nkako Biranki Yo Pankana Ush Aung Chan Shani Bu Aung Chan Shani Bu Haburu Kuyombani Haburu Kuyombani Yobani Irakakan Yobani Irakashun Hiripaka piriri, hiripaka piriri, hiripaka piriri, hiripaka piriri, haburun kun yobane, yobane irakakan, yobane irakakan. Hiripaka piriri, hiripaka piriri, hiripaka piriri, hiripaka piriri, haburun kun yobane, yobane irakakan, Japon Yoshibu Mu Japon Yoshibu Camporo do Akukan Camporo do Akukan House.
As you can see, today's event is perhaps not what you would normally expect from something billed to cover law and finance. I would like to express our deep gratitude for the unexpected gift from Chief Nanawa of the Kunukui people in Brazil, bringing an indigenous blessing to this event, where we aim to bring together a number of different threads that help to weave the web of our world. I'm Jojo Mehta. I'm co-founder of Stop Ecocide International, which began in 2017 as a grassroots campaign to add mass damage and destruction of nature, or Ecocide, to the list of international crimes, currently genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. 4 years on, from that founding, as humanity faces the unprecedented threat of climate and ecological breakdown, Stop Ecocide finds itself at the heart of a fast-growing global movement to support this addition to international criminal law. Welcome to Ecocide Law and Financing the Future, the first in a series of in-person events that we're hosting here in Glasgow during COP26, with amazing partners, speakers, and creative collaborators. These islands sit at the root of an industrial and economic system that has grown to dominate the world. On its own terms, this system has been a remarkable success for a few, and an access to an unprecedented standard of living for many. But it is built on a premise that has been shown to be deeply flawed, that nature, and in much of the world, also other people, are here for our exploitation and domination, and the results are becoming everywhere apparent. As the biodiversity and climatic stability we profoundly depend upon begin to unravel, and inequalities become increasingly pronounced. This conference, COP26, addresses man-made climate change, but that is only a symptom, and without addressing root causes, our behavior cannot change fast enough. So what can we do? With all the goodwill and ambition in the world, we are barely crawling in a direction we should be sprinting in. Some would have the system collapse with the intention of starting afresh, but very few would be prepared for the real consequences of that. It is transformation, not destruction, that is needed. And this event today explores how certain strategic interventions and perspectives have the very real and concrete potential to catalyze that transformation, creating bridges from within to enable change and creativity at scale. We'll be engaging with approaches in investment and financial markets with Katie Hoffman and Ralph Chami, with First Peoples perspectives that can draw us into alignment with our planetary home, from Mindahi Bastida and Gert Peter Bruch, and of course with legal parameters to support both, and that'll be me. Louise Mcdonald here, currently of the Institute of Directors in Scotland, with an amazing history of cross-sector and collaborative work, with her work with the Young Scot charity and also with the Gender and Women and Girls group for the Scottish Parliament and many others too numerous to mention. Louise will be expertly guiding us through that conversation. But we'd like to begin with a demonstration right here and now in this room of how a shift in approach to what is familiar can open new vistas of what is possible. And that is going to be a musical provocation from two profoundly talented performers and truly remarkable people who I am also privileged to call my dear friends, Cassie Yukawa, pianist, and Simon McBurney, actor, director, and incredibly creative theatre maker.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank the opening, Chief Ninau, really very extraordinary. And I was going to say, Cassie and I were going to say that we were honoured to open this gathering, but of course it is now already been opened, a gathering itself which is opening a door, we hope, to a new reality. A reality of seeing a new way of being in this world through the work of Stop Ecocide. And COP26, of course, as we have been walking the streets, is a moment where there is an enormous, in theory, joining of voices, a listening to multiple voices. And so Cassie's, and this is her provocation, was to begin by joining two voices together from the past, to reflect that, and also to help us think and meditate for a moment about our future. And she proposes to join the voice of J.S. Bach with the great Nobel laureate Hermann Hesse. In Bach's 48 Preludes and Fugues, he himself opened a new door into the way that we can listen to music, the way that music can be heard. And so Cassie will begin by playing, will begin by playing the door into those preludes and fugues, that is to say, prelude number 1. Hermann Hesse, after the trauma of the First World War, wrote an extraordinary series of essays called Wanderung. And that opened a new view on nature, and I will be reading his great essay on trees in combination with Cassie. Branches and the smallest scar on my bark. I was made to form and reveal the eternal in my smallest special detail. A tree says, my strength is trust. I know nothing about my fathers. I know nothing about the 1,000 children that every year spring out of me. I live out the secret of my seed to the very end, and I care for nothing else. I trust that God is in me. I trust that my labor is holy. Out of this trust, I live. So, when we are stricken and cannot bear our lives any longer, then a tree has something to say to us. Be still. Be still. Look at me. Life is not difficult. Life is not easy. Those are childish thoughts. Let God speak within you, and your thoughts will grow silent. You are anxious because your path leads away from mother and home. But every step and every day lead you back again to the mother. Home is neither here nor there. Home is within you. Or home is nowhere at all. A A longing to wander tears my heart when I hear trees rustle in the wind at evening. If one listens to them silently for a long time, this longing reveals its kernel, its meaning. It is not so much a matter of escaping from one's suffering, though it may seem to be so. It is a longing for home, for a memory of the mother, for new metaphors for life. It leads home. Every path leads homeward. Every step is birth. Every step is death. Every grave is mother. So the tree rustles in the evening when we stand uneasy before our own childish thoughts. Trees have long thoughts. Long breathing and restful, just as they have longer lives than ours. They are wiser than we are, as long as we do not listen to them. But when we have learned how to listen to trees, then the brevity and the quickness and the childlike hastiness of our thoughts achieve an incomparable joy. Whoever has learned to listen to trees no longer wants to be a tree. That is home. That is happiness.
Thank you so much for that. Well, the wisdom of trees, a longing to wander, breathing in and breathing out. I don't know how your day's been going so far, but it's surely better now, having had that experience. That was really, really wonderful. Thank you to everyone for that. So my name is Louise Mcdonald, and as Jojo said, I am the National Director for the Institute of Directors in Scotland. And the Institute of Directors essentially works with people who are on boards to try and encourage them to think about board governance and ethical governance. So very strong tie to the issues for today. I am also the co-chair of the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls. and a founder member of the Natural Change Foundation, which was a charity that seeks to connect leaders with nature and reconnect leaders with nature. So today I'm going to give you some housekeeping. First of all, I'm merely your moderator, so I'm doing some housekeeping, and then I'm going to introduce each of our amazing speakers for you today. As you are aware, in Scotland, if you're moving around, please do wear your mask. Feel free to keep wearing it as you're sitting, but certainly when you're moving around the venue, just to keep others safe. Please have your phones on silent if they're not already, but feel free to share on your social media of choice if you'd like to share today, and the hashtag is Stop Ecocide, and it's at Ecocide Law. And the emergency exits, I was going to stand up for this, but the cameraman told me I couldn't. I wanted to do my best air hostess manoeuvre, but the emergency exits are at the back and at the side should the alarm go off. There is no planned alarm, we should be fine. We're going to be sharing microphones. As you can see, we are somewhat audio challenged with the number of microphones that we have, so please bear with us as we pass microphones along the line. And so I'm going to introduce each of our speakers and ask them to make some opening remarks. And we'll go through all of our speakers first, and then what we'll then do is open it up to yourselves for any questions or reflections or particular points that you want to raise. And we're due to run until 5 p.m, okay? And we will respect your schedules and we'll make sure that we finish on time for you. So, pleasure for me, first of all, to introduce Ralph Chami. Ralph is Assistant Director at the International Monetary Fund and co-founder of Rebalance Earth and Blue Green Future. And his areas of specialisation are many, but they include banking regulation and supervision, financial markets, and his hobbies include music and yoga, and even more incredibly, was a semi-professional guitarist for over 40 years. So we could bring in a guitar later. Could be good. Ralph, I was sharing with him last night, was I ended up in a bit of a spiral of reading about his work around whales, as in blue whales, and their role in terms of natural capital, where he's done absolutely seminal work. Really extraordinary to learn about that as well. So Ralph's going to do a bit for us about discovering what he terms a missing piece in the economics equations that led him to a mechanism that has the potential to transform the notoriously destructive carbon offsetting markets in a way that has far-reaching positive implications. So Ralph, over to you.
Thank you so much. If you get bored, then we'll bring the guitar and I'll try some guitar music. Please come in.
Welcome.
All right. So I've been trying to figure out how to start this conversation, and how much time do I have? A few minutes? Okay. So let me start from the end of this story. The end of this story is a new paradigm, economic paradigm that has nature at its core. And I claim that this new paradigm is not only preferable, but it's actually feasible. Within our reach, if we work together. And it's the paradigm that will provide sustainable and shared prosperity for all. And what it does, it recognizes what we seem to have forgotten since the Cartesian revolution. The Cartesian paradigm did wonderful things. It gave supremacy to the mind, but in giving supremacy to the mind, it divorced the mind from the corporal body and divorced humans from their natural world. So for those of you, I was raised by Jesuits. I recall a story being in a seminar, and the brother said, the prodigal son is about the loving father that welcomes home his son. And I was 13. I raised my hand and I said, I'm sorry, but I read it differently. I read it as the son who woke up one day, realized that he made a mistake, and he came home. The father was always there because he's the father. But it's the son that called home and said, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. But he came home a different person than when he left home. He came home wiser and more humble. So this paradigm is about coming home to nature. By the way, everything I tell you is in mathematics, but I'm telling you a story. So I'm just going to skip the mathematics and tell you a story of how we can actually construct this paradigm together. And it's not too late. In this gloom and doom environment, there's actually a beautiful vision within our reach. And hopefully during this session we get to talk about it. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ralph. And next up, I'm going to introduce Gert Peter Bruch. And Gert is founder and president of Planet Amazon and a French director, journalist, photographer and author, and has been committed to the protection of the Amazon rainforest for more than 30 years. And he is an executive member of the Alliance of Mother Nature's Guardians. And Gert is going to share with us the broad context of the profound contribution of the indigenous world to the protection of Mother Nature and the importance of cultural collaboration. He is also then going to introduce Mindahi, Crescencio, Bastida, Muñoz. And Mindahi is the director of the Original Nations Programme at the Fountain and a member of the Mother Earth Delegation. He is an executive member of the Alliance of Guardians of Mother Nature and a spokesperson of the recently created Grand Council of the Eagle and the Condor. He is also, as if all that wasn't enough, the general coordinator of the Atomi Regional Council of the High Lerma River Basin in Mexico and Mother Earth, as well as the rights to self-determination of original nations. And Mindahi will speak of the perspective of an economics of care and the sacred, of inclusion and dialogue between humans and the earth, and where we must go from here. So, Gert, I'm going to hand over to you first of all.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say that I'm really honored to be part of this event, and thank you, Jojo, for your invitation. Like you said, I'm a founder of Planet Amazon, but I want to say that I'm French, but I raised as a European boy, but I have blood flooding in my veins that are from indigenous people from the Sahara Desert, and that's not a chance, a coincidence that I'm here seated with Mindahi Bastida or Chief Lin. I wanted to just to introduce that very important information for me as well. I want to point that when I started to get involved at the age of 18 as an activist for the safeguard of the Amazon rainforest and its indigenous peoples, nobody were then using the word ecocide. That seems so logical to us now, but at this time we didn't know how to put a word on that. But indeed, the ecocide of the Amazon was already increasing. We knew then that we had about 20 to 30 years to save the Amazon rainforest, because scientists were telling us so. At Rio 92, we believed that we could stop the disaster. We were wrong. They didn't stop it. They have accelerated indeed and amplified it ever since, and not any of our protests, not any of our temporary or so few victories were able to change that. Now that time is short before the collapse, we have to find new ways of raising consciousness among the destroyers. And the most interesting one is to make them understand that killing Mother Earth is an economical heresy. One example that comes to my mind is the one of the Belo Monte mega dam. I don't know if you heard about the Belo Monte mega dam, but there was first that mega structure was first rejected in the late 90s, thanks to the mobilization of thousands of activists and indigenous leaders around the world, including Chief Payakan from the Kayapo people. He died last year of COVID, so it's very important for me to say his name again and again and again. Chief Raoni, which I know from 30 years. I've been touring with him around the world, and music superstar Sting. So the project came back to life under the presidency of Lula, and despite unprecedented international mobilization, the dam was constructed by Dilma Rousseff in violation of indigenous and traditional communities' rights. The last of its turbines has been inaugurated recently by President Bolsonaro. So an apocalypse has been announced by opponents of the project in the region of the dam, one of the richest in the world in terms of biodiversity. This apocalypse has indeed taken place. It's happening and it's continuing right now. The endemic biodiversity of the large Chingu Loop has been Chingu Band has been severely degraded. Deforestation continues to ravage the area, all because politicians have claimed to want to put economic interest above all other considerations, in defiance of existing law. Except that this project, like many others, is not only a fraud, but also an economic sham, as well as a monumental absurdity. On the one hand, the dam, subject to the vagaries of the floods of the Xingu River, does not fulfill the promises of its builders with regards to the quantity of energy produced. But what is much more serious still is to have built this dam by destroying an immense zone of forest, which render to the residents and to humanity as a whole much more important services than this superstructure. I've made a film where there is a scientist explaining the absurdity of megadams. I'm going to read exactly what he said. The tree population in Amazonia, which circumference greater than 4 inches, is estimated to be around 400 billion individuals. Making a calculation for the whole of Amazonia, that makes 40 billion pounds of over 5 trillion gallons of water that are transferred from the ground by the roots to the trunk and to the leaves into the atmosphere every day. 40 trillion pounds of water is a flow that is greater than the Amazon River. The evaporation process consumes energy that comes from the sun, all natural. If you want to know and realize how much energy is consumed to evaporate these 40 billion pounds of water, we can make this comparison. To be able to plug to a power socket that would produce this energy, we would need 200,000 hydroelectric plants like Belo Monte. 200,000. And it's just for one day of activity. So there is no human system, whether it be in the next 2,000 years of technological evolution, that can compete with the role the forest has, and that is only one of its purposes. It has a lot more. And that's a scientist talking, it's not me. I gave you this example just to show you economically it's insane and absurd to destroy the rainforest. For a long time, forests have supported people. Forest population have been using forests in a reasoned manner for thousands of years and know how to produce by creating, planting, managing, and regenerating. Inspired by the principle, that is to say, to take without eradicating, scientists propose to exploit the molecules of the canopy, which are of unlimited wealth. This is one economic avenue among many. Like I said, it is economically absurd to destroy forests or any other ecosystem. But above all, knowingly destroying ecosystem is the greatest crime of all. Why? Because it compromises the chances of future generations of all forms of life to be able to appear on Earth, including that of our human species. How will business be if humanity is reduced to only small groups of surviving humans in terrible conditions? Do the financial lobbies that dictate their laws to states seriously believe that artificial intelligence will solve the survival problems then? So business doesn't exist without life. The business world needs to remember that it lives on one and the same planet and totally rethink its paradigm. No longer destroying the lives of the weakest, of defenseless in order to enrich themselves is a prerequisite. Promoting recognition of the crimes of ecocide at all levels of our society must become a cordon of security for all action, whether financial or not. Within the Alliance of Guardians of Mother Nature, we believe that eco-crimes should be recognized and punished in many types of jurisdictions. Internationally, of course, but also locally. The indigenous peoples supported by the UN Declaration defining their rights, unfortunately not non-binding, are actively working to draft their own consultation protocols and to legalize their own jurisdictions. It is recognized that these initiatives have the potential to help protect the territories more effectively. Some even ask that the recognition of their rights one day make it possible to judge the eco-crimes committed on the land through their own jurisdictions. Beyond the recognition of crime of ecocide, many call for the recognition of the rights of nature. This to allow a total paradigm shift where the priority would become again the protection of future generations. And those who say that it's not possible, that it will lead to a collapse for the world economy, should open the history books. Because, you know, these are exactly the arguments used by opponents of the abolition of slavery on other times. Slavery has been abolished almost everywhere, and the world, the economic world still exists. So I think that the business will have to change its paradigm, willingly or by force, otherwise Mother Nature will remind him who is in charge. And now it's my honor really to introduce my brother and member also of the Alliance, Mindahi Bastida.
Hachi kwada hachiku. You hear me? Hachi kwada hachiku dihmewa rasukoi rasukoihimu. Good afternoon, good day, good night. With the permission of these sacred lands and the permission of the Father Sky and Mother Earth, I'm here in this time and space, sharing this beautiful time with you. And I'm really honored to be here and being alive. It's a blessing to be alive. It was around 7,500 years ago when we had more than 30,000 cultures. And now we have almost half. We have lost half of the cultures around the world. And it was because some people began to take over of taking care. So the Dominion Code was born, and colonization. Colonization over minds, over matter, over spirit. Religions were imposed by force. And also, we have lost almost half of the species, and we are at risk. Scientists say that 1 million species are at risk with this climate change because there is an ecological crisis. I was there in 1992 in the Earth Summit in Rio. I was very young. I had big expectations because I saw the world coming together. Worldwide leaders were coming together. I saw even artists, thinkers, politicians, activists, original peoples and nations were coming too. I met over there Chief Raoni. But I saw something, and in between. I saw many leaders they were having these close meetings, contact point meetings. It was the other one, the civil society meetings and the Gloria. Maybe there is a chance to come together. And it was the first time that the United Nations acknowledged that traditional knowledge was important to preserve life in the planet. And it was the first time as well that we saw how these binding agreements were signed. Climate change, the biodiversity, and the desertification. And you know, it was before in 1972 when there was another, even more anthropocentric way of thinking meeting in, in 72 Copenhagen. And maybe there is going to be another one very soon over there. But we don't have anything to celebrate. Anything. I'm sorry to say that Mother Earth is crying. Father Sky is crying. The rivers are crying, the mountains. And because this touch of relationship, and even in original nations and people's communities, we are touched by this anthropocentric way of thinking and doing and feeling and acting. We are losing. We are late. We are late. I can tell you so many things, but I saw this beautiful, the most beautiful butterflies in my life when I was growing up. And I don't see them anymore. It's very sad. I could see the pink, the orange, the yellow, the green, fluorescent butterflies, and they are not here anymore in this world. It's very sad. I come from a lineage from my grandmother and my grandfather of the bird, and we respect so much the sky. When we were taking away our rights, collective rights, to the integral way of living being, because the nation state took over. They can give permissions and concessions to mining companies, to any company to pollute. And then I learned in the 90s that there was this principle, the Polluter Pay Principle. Can you imagine? So you can pollute and pay, and there is no problem. So I remember that. And then I remember the doctrine in the Christianism, the doctrine of discovery as well. The papal laws, the divine laws to take over, to domain the world. And they are still active. They are still active. And we have been asking again and again to rescind those papal laws, because those papal laws are still active in so many nation states. So we don't have the right to take care and give care to our territories. It's very sad because 80% now is acknowledged by the scientists, not just by the scientists, it's acknowledged by us that we give care and take care, not just by to those 80% of biodiversity in the world that are in our territories. We take care and give care for the whole planet. We pray for you too, for all living beings. So this paradigm that is killing Mother Earth, name it whatever, neoliberal policies, capitalism, socialism, because it's like that as well. Communism is the same kind of paradigm that is anthropocentric. But we, as original nations, we still have something to offer to the world. How we relate to the natural world and to the spirit. And this is very important. So we need to remember who we are as human beings. We are not the peak of the creation. We are the problem. And we must behave. You know, when I read these theories of new institutionalism and all of those theories that, you know, the rules of the game and that governs how to relate to each other. But really our institutions are the problem because they are based in this positivist way of thinking. So we need to remember who we are as human beings. We need to be more humble. Because they said, of course, we are the most intelligent beings in this world. Are we? Are we intelligent? I think we have failed. We have failed. So the problem is not just our problem in the communities. It's your problem as well. It's our problem. For that, we need to come together and listen to each other. We need to get rid of that science that is killing Mother Earth. We need not just intercultural dialogue or interdisciplinary sciences. No, we need transdisciplinary sciences. We need to understand each other again and come back to the original instructions, to the original principles that can give us life again. We don't want any more development. We don't want this kind of development that is killing Mother Earth. Not even the make-up sustainable development. It's masking. It's masking what the business as usual. We need a good living paradigm. Just to have access to clean water for all beings, clean air, clean earth, clean energies, based in clean ideas. We need clean ideas. So let's think beautifully. Dikama de Moshingentini. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Okay, I'm now. Is this microphone working? Can you hear me at the back? This is where my drama training should come into place. I should be able to speak to the back of the room. Okay, you can hear me now. Hi, everyone. Okay, so thank you so much for that. I'm now, as if she needs any introduction, about to introduce Jojo, who, as she mentioned, in 2017, alongside Scottish legal pioneer, the late wonderful Polly Higgins, to support making severe harm to nature an international crime. And as the campaign's executive director and key spokesperson, Jojo has overseen a really remarkable growth of this global movement, whilst coordinating legal developments, diplomatic traction, and public narrative. And she was the convener of the independent expert panel for the legal definition of ecocide, chaired by Philippe Sands QC and Dior Fault. So Jojo will explain how changing the legal parameters can shortcut systemic transitions from within the existing system. She has described ecocide law as not just a stick, but also a carrot for the corporate world. So Jojo, tell us what this means.
Thank you. And I just wanted to pick up on what the previous speakers have been saying, and I'm also hoping that we can poke the wonderful Ralph shortly to give us a little bit more detail about what it is he's discovered that can start transforming the carbon offsetting market, because I can't wait to hear about that. But I also really want to acknowledge that the depth and starkness and the profundity of the problem that we're facing has been so beautifully summed up by Mindahi in particular. And the question remains, I mean, many of us are beginning to be able to see, you know, the sort of the depth of systemic change that's required. And yet what we can also see is that if we behave around this in a conflictual way, we create conflict. And I think that's what Mindahi's referring to when he says we must all communicate, we must all come together. So, yes, we can see these systemic changes need to happen, but how? And one of the things I think, one of the secrets, or perhaps a couple of the little secrets that might enable this, I think are embedded in this panel. And I know I've got one of them, and I know there are others. That criminalizing serious harm to nature is, as Mindahi described, a clean idea. It's very simple, it's very clear, and it's not something that we kind of construct. Our legal system has grown up over many years, and it's grown up through the mindset that has led us to where we are now, that yes goes back to Descartes, but it actually goes back much further. So that duality goes back through the Catholic Church, and it was the papal bulls or decrees that Mindahi was referring to that are a symptom of that attitude, which is about duality. It's about the spirit pitted against the body. It's about masculine versus feminine. It's about, you know, the human versus nature. It's this duality that runs right back. And you can go further back. You can go back to Plato. It's ancient. And so in a way, where we've ended up with this sort of dominating, you know, we see nature as something we can exploit rather than something we're deeply dependent upon and intertwined with, has logically led us to where we are. And yet, you know, and what we've ended up with is a system that is so dominating and that has sort of really taken over the whole global economy in particular, and it is the global economy that paradigm serves. That if we're going to actually change that, we have to do it in a way that economy understands. And we believe, I mean, on the legal side, we believe that ecocide law, or that criminalising serious harm to nature, could be a very, very simple and clear way of doing this. And it's one that is becoming recognised by more and more people, and not just in the world of those who understand that we're deeply intertwined with nature, but also those who operate in the, you know, the highest echelons of the economic system. And I'm hoping that Katie will also be able to speak a little bit to this side of things in a moment. But for example, a couple of weeks ago, the International Corporate Governance Network, which is a network of, an investor-led network of asset managers, that between them, these firms, you know, banks like BlackRock, like UBS, you know, firms like Ernst & Young, you know, that manage over half the world's managed assets, 59 trillion plus, sent a statement into this conference, or into COP26, actually recommending governments to collaborate internationally to criminalize ecocide. Now that is amazing. What it shows is that the business community is really starting to grasp that there is a real value in having enforceable legal deterrence. Because those who want to work towards the right direction are kind of hamstrung by the fact that those who don't or can't be bothered are simply not prevented from continuing in the old ways. And finance is very much like water, it will flow where it can. And so being able to close certain doors can be a very simple and straightforward way to have that finance and that money flow in different directions. And so I think there's something to be said here for looking at how a clean idea, one that echoes a sort of reality, if you like, that the indigenous cultures around the world profoundly understand, which is that when we damage Mother Earth, there are consequences. It really is that simple. We're seeing it in apocalyptic, you know, increasingly apocalyptic ways around the world. And so to insert that truth into the centuries-old and gradually developed and refined legal system could be hugely powerful. And to do so at the level of an international crime takes the whole body of environmental law into a new space. At the moment, there is plenty of environmental law around the world, but it's not particularly well enforced, not taken as seriously as other bodies of law, particularly that protecting people, but even more so property. And that it's missing this foundational piece. I mean, at least if you work in social justice or you work in human rights, you kind of know that mass murder and torture are beyond the pale, they're criminal. I mean, you can't, as a business, for example, you can't go to a government and say, can I have a permit to kill 500 people for my new business? It's just not even going to enter your head. And yet, we can get a permit for the Belamonte Dam. We can get a permit for bottom trawling the ocean, or for deep sea mining, or whatever the latest thing is. But if we criminalize a certain degree of harm, or the threat of a certain degree of harm, what we're doing is really concentrating the minds of those people making those decisions, and we're also saying at the highest level that this is not just criminal, it's not just unlawful. I mean, it's not just about how many toxins you use in a certain circumstance before you cross a red line. I mean, you're not going to talk about how much can you beat somebody up before you nearly kill them, but not quite. I mean, you just don't even go there. And criminal law has the capacity to both create that taboo and at the same time to reinstate a kind of truth about how we, in practice, need to react, need to interact with nature in order for us to be healthy and for nature to be healthy. I'll leave it there for now, but really looking forward to Katie's remarks.
Thank you. Thanks, Jojo. It's that really powerful idea. I know you've described it as a guardrail as well, which I think is a really powerful idea. And so, Katie, coming to you now, Katie Hoffman, who I'm delighted to introduce, is an entrepreneur and investor who focuses on scaling climate solutions and is a partner at Regeneration VC and is co-chair of the Nexus Global Energy Innovation and Environment Group. Katie has actively supported international human rights work for over a decade, including work as an analyst for 2 plaintiff-side firms in South America and the US. And Katie is going to speak to us about capital markets and how they can shift as policy moves and how we can collectively make a difference to that shift. So, Katie, over to you.
Hello. There we go. What a tough act to follow. Up close, yeah. Whew, deep breath. Thank you thank you, Chief Nanawa, for your invocation. I have a lot of things to say about the capital market. Is this working okay? Better? Okay. Better. Okay. So when I first met Jojo, it was through a dear friend, Julia Jackson, who is a avid supporter of ensuring that Ecocide is, enshrined in bodies of law and made codified. And we chatted and we started getting to talking about, the passions and what we focus on, right? What makes you tick? And I was telling her about my father and his work in human rights law. So I'm the daughter, as many fathers on the stage today, of someone who has been consistently working his entire life to address genocide, crimes against humanity, and doing that through every legal avenue possible, at least within the United States, and has addressed some very significant crimes against humanity that always had an underlying environmental impact. So Unocal, Shell, the extraction of resources, and the forceful disappearing of human beings. It's a tale as old as time, which is very sad, but watching him litigate against companies and work for the folks on the ground who were extracted from, hurt, and then had to deal with a whole new legal system that they had no idea how to navigate. Watching people like my father work consistently, though, to make sure that the Geneva Conventions, crimes against humanity, genocide, are considered real crimes, right, where we can hold companies accountable. That's actually what drew me into finance, because I watched litigation take too long. 30 years later, people are already, have been hurt, resources have been extracted. What can we do ahead of time? And that's how I got into finance. I got inspired by the idea that maybe, just maybe, we could codify into the law of capital markets that we will not do certain things, that there is a line we will not cross. We will not use child slave labor. We will not extract resources from places where we do not, we, the collective, we have ownership or knowledge of, and there should be traditions and standards, which there are, but they're not being acknowledged in the current legal system. And I do agree with making sure that there is, aligned with crimes against humanity, ecocide. That is something that I think that the financial markets need to pay attention to. And also, it'll make my job as a venture capitalist so much easier. I don't have to deal with thinking about the fact that I'm going to be working with folks that don't actually take into account my friends on the ground who are doing everything that they can to preserve their biodiversity, their culture, but aren't sometimes being heard within current legal structures. And it doesn't make investment easy for those of us that really want to make returns without hurting anyone or anything. And I think that's kind of my message is, as someone coming to COP, this is my 6th one, and honestly, it's a lot of talk. We make a lot of pledges, but the community here, I think we can all build together and hopefully, focus on beyond net zero, right? Like how do we regenerate what we've already disrupted and ensure and codify in legal structures and goalposts that can allow the investment community to really operate effectively that which is sacred and that which is preserving life. And I just appreciate being on the panel with you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Katie. Okay, so now is the time I'm giving folks advance notice to start thinking about any questions or points that you would like to raise. But before I do that, Ralph, I just want to come back to you and share with us and expand on that core idea that you talked about this kind of new paradigm. Tell us a bit more about that.
All right. So let's start with the current paradigm. My mom used to say, if you have nothing old, you have nothing new. So let's look at where we are right now. The current paradigm, for whatever reason, assume that nature is free and limitless. Basically, that's it. That somehow, that's why we can kill with impunity, pollute the oceans, because nature is infinite, and infinite. In fact, Francis Bacon says we were endowed with nature with infinite commodities. That's how the juggernaut of the Industrial Revolution came. For a period of time, we thought we were doing great because we were just basically abusing nature, because for whatever reason, just this assumption, and by the way, I'm a theoretical economist, trained economist, I'm a practicing economist, so, and I taught for many years too. So this was an assumption made for, I couldn't find who justified it, but it's there. Now what does that mean? That means today, you asked me about, I valued the services of the whale. People said, you put a price on life. I said, no, you put a price on life. I'm trying to tell you that that price that you put is much bigger than the price that you have, because the price that you gave to life is zero. How do I know that? Well, today, if a ship, right now, right this second, if a ship were to hit the most gorgeous creature in the ocean, they're all beautiful creatures, but I studied the blue whale for 4 years. The blue whale is the largest creature you'd ever see. Inside the mouth of a blue whale, you can fit the largest African elephant you can imagine. That would disappear in her mouth only. Okay, forget the rest of the body. So I spent 4 years, she was feeding right next to me. She could have swallowed the whole boat if she wanted to, but she doesn't. So suppose a ship today were to hit that beautiful blue whale. What's the penalty? Does anybody know? Zero. Nothing. Watch that beautiful creature skewered on the bow of a ship coming into port of Los Angeles. There are many pictures of those. There's no penalty. So that means, as a practicing economist, that means the value, the price that you put, because we live in a market system. Until we change that system, I'm working within that system to change, to use the system to change people's minds. I don't want to say we need to start from zero, but we don't have time. So that price right now is zero. But so when I know that, because we all know that. So the question is, what do we know about the whales? That's where I started. Well, the scientists already knew that. Indigenous populations already knew that. But in the language of science, we discovered that the whales, these great whales, capture carbon on their body beyond your wildest imagination. A great whale captures as much carbon on its body equivalent to 2,000 trees on its body. But the blue whale does something incredibly interesting. That magnificent creature feeds on the smallest of organisms called krill. And krill feeds on phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are considered the lungs of the planet, because those microscopic organisms that float in the open sea, those capture about 30% of the carbon dioxide that we emit. And they return as a gift to us over 50% of the oxygen that's out there. So every other breath, you should thank the phytoplankton, if you like. So there's a beautiful virtuous cycle. The whale, think of a triangle in your head. The base of that triangle is a whale that feeds on krill. The krill feeds on phyto. Now, we need to connect the phyto to the whale. The phyto to exist, it needs phosphorus, nitrogen, and iron. Guess where they find it? In the poop of the whale. Those whales come around and they poop, and their poop floats and fertilizes the phyto. More phyto, more krill, more food. But more phyto, more carbon being absorbed. As a practitioner, financial economist, when I was sitting with these scientists who knew this, by the way, since Andy Pershing's 2010 paper, it's not something that I discovered, they already knew that. I asked the following question: well, how much does a whale capture in carbon on its body and indirectly through its fertilization of phytoplankton? And they said, we don't know. The evidence is out there in about 27 papers. Ralph, why don't you go read and figure it out? So my colleagues and I did that. Dinah is one of my colleagues who did that with me. And we discovered that one whale is equivalent to thousands of trees in carbon sequestration, whether it be on its body or through its fertilization of the phytoplankton. So why am I telling you this? Now, remember, the price of right now, if you kill a whale, it has a price of 0. In some countries where they still eat whale meat, kill that whale, chop it to pieces, it fetches a price of 40,000 if it's a fin whale. Okay? Now, so I'm looking at this thinking, but wait a minute, there's a price for carbon. There's a carbon market out there, right? Climate Accord, Paris Accord. What is Paris Accord all about? Capturing carbon, sequestering carbon, reducing carbon emission. There's a futures price now for carbon. I checked before I came here, it's $73 per tonnage. Which means now, since the whale is grabbing all that carbon, can we value the service that the whale has been providing to us for free while we kill it with impunity? So my colleagues and I did that, and we discovered that one whale is providing a service just in carbon sequestration to humanity equivalent to over $2 million per whale. Just in carbon. So people said, oh, but Ralph, you're putting a price on life. I said, no. I work for the IMF. They pay me a salary. The whale has been working for us forever for free. Why don't you pay the whale value of its service? And that's a minimum of 2 million, because whales do a lot more than just capture carbon. That's why we refer to them as keystone species. They increase fish stocks. There's whale tourism. We even benefit from them. We put people in a boat and we show them the whale. We collect the money and then we kill the whale. It's incredible what we do, right? A guy calls me from Paris, says, hey, Ralph, you valued the whale service. My name is Fabio Berzaghi. My colleagues and I just published a paper in Nature Journal. We discovered that the forest elephants, these are not the savanna ones, these are the forest elephants that you don't get to visit, they're dying. They used to be 1,200,000. They're down to 90,000. IUCN said in the next decade there'll be none left. He said, we made an incredible discovery. Those forest elephants, as they forage in the forest, they increase the ability of the forest to capture carbon by 7%. And when you lose those forests, the forest loses its ability to sequester carbon. Ask any elephant scientist, they'll tell you the same thing. A forest without its elephants, it's a sorry sight of a forest. So it's not about planting trees. It's about, as I learned from Ian Redmond sitting here, it's fauna and flora interacting with each other, creating the beauty of life, as we're learning from everyone here. So he said, can you value that, please? Maybe somebody will listen. So we said, yes, if you work with us, then we'll value the services of a forest elephant. Just in terms of carbon sequestration, one forest elephant should be paid $1.75 million. Okay? By the way, this is pure mathematics, but I'm not talking about that now. That work is highly technical work. But the upshot of it is, if you want to pay, so nature should be paid for its services. Now, I want to go to something that both Jojo and everyone is saying, but how do we do that? I mean, okay, science tells us, indigenous populations tell us, nature is incredible. Duh, yes. And I come around and say, because I need to, you see, I live at the IMF for 23 years. I've negotiated all kinds of things you can imagine with countries. When you talk to policymakers and people on the dark side like me, the finance guys, I call them the what's in it for me crowd. You need to speak their language. We are facing existential risk. We cannot demonize anybody. We need everybody inside the tent, holding hands. We can sing Kumbaya if you like, but we need to fix the problem. We cannot demonize finance people and others say, no, no, you can't have this conversation, only us. No, that doesn't work this way because that roof is going to fall on all of us, not on some of us. So we all need to be inside. So we need to speak their language. Their language is dollars and cents. So when I wrote the article on the whale and the elephant was to engage my crowd, not you, the converts. We don't want to preach to the converts. We want to preach to those that are sitting out there and say, you've demonized me. You don't want me part of this conversation. I want to say, no, I want to bring you into this conversation. But what is the language that appeals to you? So we took all that thing in the science, the beauty, unfortunately we didn't talk to indigenous people, but we talked to the scientists, and they said nature is valuable. But the scientists speak the language of science. People, my guild speaks the language of dollars and cents. So what did I do with my colleagues? We translated that language from the science into dollars and cents. So that when you walk in and you say, I need to conserve this area of salt marshes, you know what the first thing comes to our policymakers? How much is this going to cost me? That's very well understood. And then you say, well, it's going to cost us $1 million to preserve the salt marshes of England. They say, oh, what do I get in return? Oh, you get biodiversity, ecosystem services. You've lost the conversation. Because you're talking apples and they want to hear oranges. So what we did, we said, no, let's convert all that benefits in the science into dollars and cents. So that now when you walk in and you say, I need $1 million to conserve the salt marshes, the lawyer sitting will say, because they're not scientists, they'll say, well, what do I get in return? You get $1 billion in return. Billion is greater than $1 million. So give me the money. Why am I telling you this? I just finished a project for UNEP on seagrass. We were asked, can you value seagrass globally? In carbon sequestration, I'm not supposed to tell you, well, I might as well say it. Dinah, can I say it? No? Okay. Would you like to know what is the value of just in carbon sequestration of seagrass globally? Over $1 trillion. Over the time, beautiful, in today, present value. Now, how do you do that? Let's not go into the technical detail, but how do we take this to the markets so they can do the investment? So if science tells you, there are 4 pillars to this work. One is, what does the science tell you? So we need two people like me come around, financial economists, and they evaluate it. Is that enough? No. I have to do what Jojo and you were saying. You need the law. Because if you care about something, it's not enough to say, I care about it. In the US, we say, put your money where your mouth is. Okay? So what do we need to do? New Zealand did it. They said, if you touch a river, you go to jail. They conferred personhood on rivers. A river has as much rights as you and me. They have rights and you have responsibility towards that river. And what they did, they assigned a value to it. So they codified it in the law exactly. You need to do that. That's what's been missing to bring the power of the markets into all of this. Because by definition, capital is two things, is an asset and codification in the law. Sir Partha Dasgupta talks about natural capital. Natural capital is a terminology that economists use. That's not the language of the markets. When you tell somebody like me from the markets, this is capital, I'm going to open your balance sheet and take a look. Where is the whale on your balance sheet? I can't see it. Where is your elephant on your balance sheet? I can't see it. Why? Because it's not codified in the law. And what do you need to codify it in the law? If the elephant is in your country and you really care for it, you say, if that elephant is a national treasure. You heard that elephant, Chami and his colleagues, whoever did it, valued it at $2 million. That's the penalty. Why do you do that? Because when you codify an asset, it becomes capital. When it becomes financial capital, it's a new class of assets. Then the financial markets know very well what to do with financial assets. I can give you a zillion examples because we're working on it right now. I actually know one group of people that are already working on transferable certificates on an exchange based on the rights of nature. What they're waiting for are the policymakers to do their job. If you tell me enough talk, I tell you I fully agree with you. What is the action in a market system? Policymakers need to do their job. If they care for nature, they have to codify it in the law. And you start by saying, if you touch that, there's a penalty to criminal and financial. But we don't want to really punish, we want to create incentives. How would the incentive work? Remember that story of the ship coming through and hitting a whale? Let's say it's Chile. Chile has beautiful, I was there, they have incredible Chilean blue whale. Okay, bear with me 2 minutes, I'll wrap up. So suppose you're a captain coming through Gulf of Corcovado and you hit a humpback. Let's suppose the Chileans say, they declare, they haven't, but let's assume they declare that the humpback is a national, well actually they have blue whale. Let's say blue whale is a national treasure. If you hit that, the penalty, I did value their services of their blue whale, it's at $4 million per blue whale. The penalty is immediate, $4 million. What do you think will happen next? I'll tell you what happens next. It's not the captain who's going to stop the ship from hitting. Lloyd's of London is going to call the owner of the tanker. Say, come here, man. When we insured you, there was no asset in the water that was worth $4 million. That insurance contract that we wrote for you, we had no idea there was an asset in the water, Chilean asset, that is worth $4 million. And if you damage it, we have to pay on your behalf. So we're going to change your contract and say you're on your own. Now, the owner of the tanker is going to panic because he or she does not want their tankers to go around uninsured. So what do you do when you want your insurance company to insure you? We all have cars. We all have alarms on our cars. Why do you have an alarm on your car? Not to protect you, so that the insurance would insure you. You put a device on your car that reduces the probability of your car being stolen so that the insurance company doesn't have to indemnify you. Same thing. The owner of the tanker is going to try to put something on that ship that keeps the ship away from the whale because they don't want to pay that money. But notice what I've just described for you. A whole market system arises around the protection of nature. So the paradigm is about the value of a living nature. When we valued the whale, we valued not a dead whale, we valued what we get out of a living whale. And it's 3 million, I believe is a lot more than 40,000 from eating whale meat, which by the way is not good for your health. That elephant fetches for its ivory, if it's a trophy hunt, gets about 40,000 for its tusks. A living elephant is $1.75 million just from its carbon sequestration, let alone from the other things that we learned from Ian they do for the forest. But we need to harness that power of nature to bring it into the market system. The last pillar that's been missing of the 4 pillars is the policy action. That's why Jojo's work and what you're saying, codification in the law, is paramount. That's what we want to ask of the policymakers. You care about nature, don't wax poetic. Don't tell me how much you love it. Go out there and declare it a treasure, a national treasure, and assign a value to it, and watch what happens next. The markets run to it, creating all kinds of services to protect it. And then you have an economy about a living nature. And the relationship between us and nature changes. And by the way, don't worry about the 2nd generation and the 3rd generation. All we have to bring on board is this 1st generation. Because I went to church, not because I knew anything about church, because my mom took me to church. So when you grow in a household where you see your parents caring for nature, that becomes your culture. So the change is for this generation. Once you change the behavior of this generation, if I have to bribe them, I'll do it. Whatever it is, because we all get to benefit from it. I'll stop here.
It's wonderful, thank you. I love that kind of particular moment where everybody in the audience suddenly got where you were going to with the whale thing, where everybody suddenly went, oh, that's where it works. It was brilliant. I could feel it in the room. It was fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I also, very recently, leave it to a multi-award winning director to sort you out. Thank you so much, Simon. That's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so let's move to some questions and comments. And I can see hands shooting up already. There's a lot of you. Okay, now the camera guy is not going to like me for this, but I am going to come to the people asking the questions because I'm quite sure that you've had enough of seeing me on camera anyway, so hang on. So I saw your hand coming up first, sir. So let me come to you. And if you'd like to ask your question, who it's to, I'll hold on to the microphone just for COVID. Thank you.
This is to Ralph. Thanks very much for that interesting point and the interesting research you've done about pricing. My first question is, how would you price the very rare golden whale, which is exactly the same size as the blue whale, much, much rarer, so rare in fact that maybe no one's heard of it. It doesn't eat krill and it doesn't do any poops. It's very, very beautiful and it floats around the ocean, but it doesn't do anything to do with carbon, it just exists. How would you price that? And the other question point is that maybe you've read, and a lot of people here will have read Freakonomics, where the example of the nursery school where parents were turning up late and they thought, well, how can we get parents to turn up on time? We'll pay them, we'll charge them 3 shekels, this was in Israel, for every 15 minutes they're late. What happened? The parents got later because now they didn't feel guilty about this very cheap babysitting. So the danger is that if we price it, pricing nature could be really important in certain ways, but only when the figures work for you. And if the figures are not hugely deterrent, suddenly the moral of it becomes much, much weakened, and it just becomes about money.
Okay, thank you. Ralph, do you want to just, I'm going to be quite strict on time. Do you want to have a 1 minute response to that? Thank you.
So keep in mind, the price today is 0. So it's not that I'm pricing it, you've priced it at 0. What I'm trying to tell you is you don't have the right price. That's one. Now you may tell me, well, what about others? Carbon is just the beginning of a beautiful journey. The reason I used carbon is because if you want to talk to the markets, you can't tell me I surveyed a household and asked them, how do you feel about a whale? And they told me, I love them. As a market practitioner, I will listen to you and tell you, this is very nice, go publish it in a journal. Get tenure over it if you like. Markets, if you want to bring markets into this, by the way, I didn't describe to you what the markets will do when they come in. I just told you they'll come in. But there's a second part to this story, which I may not have time to tell you here. But anyway, so the pricing, I'm first telling you, you have the wrong price. I didn't start the pricing. You're telling me nature is free. I'm telling you nature is not free. Now, if you want to tell me we should all start from 0 in an indigenous group where they already knew this, that nature was not free and limitless, that's fine. But we don't all start from the same position. We live in a market system. If you don't have a price, you have no voice. How dare we use up 1.7 Earths? That's the latest report. Do you know that? To satisfy our own consumption, we have used 1.7 Earths. Do you know what that means? Let's say today's population is entitled to 1 Earth. We consumed 2 Earths. That means we have borrowed without asking permission from the unborn. And yet we claim we love our children. Really? You have borrowed forward without asking permission. That's why Greta is angry, and she has every right to be angry. But if I were her advisor, I would tell you how much she should sue us for. 1 Earth. We borrowed from those with no voice, one Earth. You can say we're entitled to 1 Earth. Sorry, I'm not going to turn religious on you, but in the prayer it says, give us our daily bread. It didn't say give us tomorrow's bread. It said give us our daily bread. There's wisdom in some of these texts, right? So 1 Earth, 1.7 Earth, what I'm trying to tell you is the pricing. I'm not telling you this price covers everything. In fact, it's a minimum. When we did the whale, my colleagues were saying, is 2 million? I said, no, 2 million is just the beginning of the conversation, because the whale is far more valuable than its carbon sequestration. But I was talking to people in my guild, and I need to bring them inside the tent. I can't tell them the whale is a magnificent creature. They've heard that before, and they gave you no money. Conservation was your hand out begging for money. What I'm trying to tell you now is conservation, will bring money in perpetuity. Does it fix everything? No, but it creates you having an equity stake in nature. Once you have an equity stake in nature, you have something to gain. That means you have something to lose. Our first generation may not be the enlightened generation. The second and third generation that grow up are going to see that their parents care for nature. They may not know why, but that becomes their culture. That's how cultures develop. It's a repeated game, as you probably know very well. So I may not be able to value. By the way, I had people ask me, how come you don't value these guys? What about those guys? I said, let's start with what we have. Let's start there. And so the pricing is to bring the markets. Now, how will the markets come in, now that you asked me?
No, can we?
Yeah,
we've got a sea of hands, but you can continue this conversation afterwards. So give me 1 second. Coming down here, and then I'm coming back to you. Okay, over here. I'll hold on to the microphone.
Mine's more of a comment than a question, so you don't need to respond necessarily. But I have a burning frustration with what you're saying, to be honest, because I see it as a perpetuation of the same culture that's gotten us into this situation. I love the Stop Ecocide campaign because it gets to the root of the problem. But basically, I feel like what you're saying, well, no, not that, but I feel like our time would be better spent trying to transform the system that is monetizing nature, rather than trying to speak oranges to the oranges. Why don't we just change the culture? Because basically, I see it as, what would you price a child, like a human child, based on how much gardening, how much permaculture, how much ecosystem restoration they're going to do in the future? Humans are nature, and we can't start monetizing them based on an economic system, which already doesn't make any sense. It's so anthropocentric and kind of insane.
Thank you. And actually, it's something that Jojo and I have spoken about. So, Jojo, I'm going to come to you in 1 second, but I'm going to put this other question in.
Hello, my name is Ishan. I'm from India. I am also one of the editors for degrowth.info, which is an alternative economics organization. I'm a great admirer of Paul Higgins, so thank you for this meeting or event. My question is to Mr. Ralph. Firstly, you're a great storyteller. Thank you for that. But I'm not persuaded enough. So I have 2 questions to you. One, around debt justice. As we all know, IMF, being one of the central financial organizations in the world, gives a lot of borrowing to a lot of countries, and that has created huge debt problems for countries world over, especially those in the global south, including those in the Americas, Asia, Africa, etc. It's been well reported that the public health diminishing and inequality increasing are consequences of IMF conditionality. So I would be more interested to understand from you, from not just stories, but action-oriented of what IMF is doing to eliminate debt justice, and through that also understand that financing the future can no longer be the same neoliberal capitalist paradigm of spitting out numbers and talking about how do we price nature, because it's about people over profit, communities over profit, planet over profit, and not merely just refiguring which numbers are suited to, prices, ecology. So yeah, my questions are around how systemic reforms can be made than just saying the same things that people for 3 decades before you have been saying in the alternative economics paradigm. Thank you.
So actually similar themes. So Jojo, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I'll definitely take those. I'm not going to answer in detail that last one, because you can talk in more detail if you wish to Ralph afterwards. But this is where we come in. This is where ecocide law comes in. And we also have to look at the timing of this, and I think that's probably one of the key points that Ralph made here. I completely sympathise with Christabel's reaction and with the reaction of the gentleman up there. I think the immediate reaction of a lot of the people that we deal with on a day-to-day basis is very similar. I know I was on an EU side event yesterday, and there were 2 corporate representatives there, and it was almost like they were speaking a different language. It's like they would start talking and my brain would glaze over, not just my eyes, and but what I realized is that, they were using a different language, but they were trying to talk about the same thing. And we can, and you're absolutely right, there's horrendous inequality in the world, and that is why these little bugs in the system, these little Trojan horses, which are, transforming the way the carbon offsetting market works, so that instead of destroying life, it preserves life, and it starts setting the whole system going a different way. It's actually really important. We cannot just say, you've got it wrong. We've got to transform the system. We've got to transform the culture. As Ross just underlined, culture takes generations to change. And the last 2 generations in particular of the dominating West have led us to a situation where the ones who have the power to make the change speak that brain-glazing language. And so that language has to be spoken. And in the same way, I often find that spokespeople from the first people from the original nations, indigenous cultures, will say to me, but, International Criminal Court is another, colonial organization. International law is another colonial system. The legal system is unfair in the first place. Yes,
It is. It's far from perfect. It's completely anthropocentric. In fact, it's not even anthropocentric, it's property-centric. But the people who are causing the most damage operate in that very system. And so you have to create the change within that system in the language those people speak. Because unless you do that, you are not going to get change fast enough. And we don't have time to spend decades and decades changing a culture.
Thank you. Thanks, Jojo. Okay, now there was more of a sea of hands, so I'm coming down here. Who else put their hand up earlier on? There's kind of one here. Okay, I'll hold the microphone. I'll hold it. Thanks.
I'm really feeling that distinction, because we're not saying we want to put a price on culture. That this amazing person here, he has his own culture, which is under threat. His whole way of life, as I understand it, I'm speaking for you, but as I understand it, is under threat. And we're about to pass the first tipping point. We're seeing the Amazon and other forests destroyed. So we have to, it is like a Trojan horse. It's almost like we have to send in the paratroops. We have to send in the paratroops. And to do that, you have to send in almost the spies. And we go in and we start changing minds. Because that's what culture is. It's what's going on in our mind and our hearts. And if you're speaking two languages, how are you going to change someone's mind and heart? And you have to work within, I have this, I demonize people. I think of someone in a suit that's male, exactly. In fact, you've got too nice a smile, you wouldn't work. So, that's what I have in my head as the enemy. How are we going to have a conversation? Am I going to have a conversation with somebody if I start with that stance? And okay, the golden whale may not have its pooping qualities, its krill, its, and we know in our side of the argument that it has a beauty and a sacredness that is beyond price. But how am I going to say that to a corporate banker? What's he going to understand? He's not going to, it will be a he probably. Might be a she, Actually, that's another story. But, how am I going to get that idea seeded in their head so that we can start to understand each other? Now, what happens after that, once the Trojan horse is in, once the SAS is in, then we can start talking about the golden whale, the relationship of an indigenous person and how they see that in a completely different, non-concrete building way. But we've got to start somewhere. We can't have this duality that Jojo was talking about. Sorry.
That's great.
If I may
Thank you.
React to this. Just
30 seconds,
30
and I'm going to put you on a timer.
I spent 23 years at the IMF. I negotiated very difficult circumstances. If you like to proselytize to people, fine. If you want to talk at people, that's your choice. If you want to convince people, you have to speak their language. If you want to demonize half of humanity, that's your option. But we're all on the Titanic. Titanic is sinking. You're telling me that the first string is angry at the second string for playing their notes. Please. These people in the markets are like us. My mom used to always say, don't argue with your brothers, because at night you're all going to come home under the same roof. So why do you want to make an enemy? They have a language. That language is dollars and cents. We didn't start that price. The price already exists on nature. It's zero. The answer to my colleague in the back, how far has your proselytization lent you? How well have you done? Look at us. If you want to demonize that group, that's fine. You can do that. But we're all going in the same boat, down. Time is not on our side. We're running out of time. If we had 100 years, yes, we can send them back to school, rehabilitate them, teach them the ethics of it. That's fine. I have no issues with this. The price is not a price on life. By the way, which one of you here, you all have jobs, is working for free? Beautiful.
There'll be a few.
Beautiful.
I was going to say,
yeah,
that's this kind of crowd.
That's nice.
Okay.
Nice. But do you go to the grocery store and you pay with thank yous, or you pay with dollars or pounds?
I was a financial markets trader for 6 years. I left that.
I understand.
Okay, we can. This
but the
feels like
issue
a
is the
side
following.
chat for sure.
The issue is the following: when you get a job, whatever job that may be, do they pay you for your intrinsic value, or they pay you for the service that you provide? No one here is being paid their intrinsic value. You're not being paid for being a great son, or a husband, or a wife, or a companion, or a citizen. You're being paid for a service that you provide to your employer. I'm saying pay nature for the service it's providing you. And then let's debate what else does nature do. But let's start there, because if you don't start there, you are going to love nature to death in real time. Sir David Attenborough said something that it hasn't sunk in. We are not only facing climate change. We're facing the death of nature. We are facing dual risk. The politician's eye is on the climate side because that's where the politics are. Sir David said, you are eating into your natural capital. You're supposed to eat into the return of your natural capital. And that natural capital is going to die in real time. So in real time, if that dies, forget fight with climate change and capturing carbon. We're going to die.
Okay.
Those two risks are linked through one activity, and one activity only: human activity. You have to change people's behavior. If you can tell me that you're proselytizing, will convince the corporate people and people who are not in this crowd through proselytizing, I welcome you. I don't believe so.
And can I just use that as a segue into, we've had a question, Katie, I'm going to come to you on this one if I can. And it's a question from Lynette Green, who's streaming in. So hi, Lynette. How do we deal with corporations who refuse to accept that value for nature and human life? What would your experience be in terms of venture capitalism around that?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to honor that this is one of the most lively debates, because we're a very diverse group, and I think we're all on the same boat, so fair game. Yep, okay. So natural capital and corporates, I'm having a hard time with that myself. I invest in early stage companies, and I do that because I want to make sure that we can mother them and get them right before they go leapfrog, you know. So imagine ensuring that Facebook had ethics and, you know, proper accounting before it became what it was and what it is. And no offense to Facebook, but like kind of a little bit. And I just, you know, I like working at the grassroots of investment, because there's so much potential for growth and so much potential for capital, but the capital is defined in different ways when it's that early stage. And I actually think Mindahi can speak quite a bit about biodiversity and culture, and how that right now is not being calculated in many ways, and we've been talking about this quite a bit, but also there's so much innovation happening on the ground. So I've gotten the chance to work with Mindahi and many in the Eagle and Condor Council, who the communities are vibrant. There's circular economy, there's everything is happening already. It doesn't necessarily need to have a market price put to it, but I agree that in order for it to translate, in order for it to be protected perhaps, there needs to be a more enhanced dialogue and at least protection of the folks on the ground who are already preserving their natural habitat and have been, and they've also faced the incursion of incredible corporate greed. I mean, genocide, and because we're talking about law, I mean, I go back to some of the cases that I've watched my dad work on and helped with. We should never, ever, ever, ever kill people so that we can extract natural resources, so that we can fuel cars that no one really needs to drive anyways. That doesn't make any sense. That's not an economy that works. And I think that if we really can think about how we listen to the folks on the ground who have been preserving biodiversity from the beginning, and ensure that there are laws, regulations, protections, and then also capital that meets communities where they're at. That's what I actually think is going to be kind of maybe a buffer to some of this corporate cop that we're seeing, right? You know, the net zero, net zero, net zero, net zero. Sorry, I've heard that so many times. I'm just like, what does it mean? Show me the calculations. And actually, there isn't unified calculations because it's not there yet. You're pointing out we need to measure it, and I agree, but it won't make a difference to the communities on the ground unless it's done in a uniform way, and there's strong governance and auditing, accountability, community accountability, and relationships, which is why I actually want to pass to Mindahi, because I think that Mindahi represents, and Chief Nanawa, like cultures that don't often get to speak on behalf of what is being lost, and we won't know what we lose until if we lose it, right? So I think, you know, maybe you could speak a little bit about the interaction of what we've just been talking about. And
well, thank you very much for the opportunity. You see, in this world that we are living in, we have been taught in school, universities, and elsewhere that culture is something and biodiversity is another thing. But it's a lie, because it's all together. We are together, and we have this touch with nature. We are nature, don't forget. So what is killing us really is this anthropocentric way of thinking. We need to change, whether we like it or not. And this transition is, as I told you, we are late. But we need to really think about how to honor life, how to honor families. We need to really gather again around families, around communities. But we are not talking about communities, just human beings. No, because that whale is sacred for us. The sky is sacred. So we need to treat water as a sacred element, not as a resource. It's a great failure. And we need to treat the air as a sacred element, and the lands, and so we need to change this paradigm that is really killing. And when we talk about that, you know, I think the world has a big debt with nature, with Mother Earth, and with the original peoples. Now they are saying now in this COP, there is, I don't know how many millions through carbon offsets. The same paradigm, anthropocentric paradigm, to put prices to everything. Mother Earth doesn't have price. Nor a mountain shouldn't have a price. Should have a price, but not in the monetary terms. In the spiritual terms, and in the matter, in this beautiful relationship with the family, because it's family. When we say all our relations, it's because the river is alive, the mountain's alive. So we really need to deconstruct this colonial way of thinking. And it's going to take us so much time. Maybe we are not going to see it, but let's begin. And we are doing with our children, because we want to honor our ancestors. We are in the between. We are in the between, and that's mystery. We can do it.
Okay. Thank you. So before I bring this to a close, I think, Jojo, do you want to have a very quick word, and then I'll bring this to a close. I'm aware of people's time. So.
I just want to express huge gratitude for this incredible panel, because I think this conversation is so important. This meeting of different worlds and different approaches. I think everybody on this panel has spoken sense in so many different ways. And I think the movement towards making ecocide a crime, in other words, to putting a criminal consequence on the destruction of nature, for me feels like it stands a bit in between these two different ways of speaking. And I feel like actually my entire job is a job of translation. It's like, how do we have this new but ancient rule be acknowledged within the system, and how does that need to land, with whom and how, so that everyone can get it? And I think that there's been an extraordinary exchange here, and I just want to thank everybody so much for taking part. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Jojo. So yes, it's just for me to kind of bring things to a close. A huge thanks to all of our speakers, our performers, partner organisations and sponsors for bringing this event to you, and also for our incredible blessing at the start of this ceremony. Thank you. If you still have burning questions, do come. I think there might be, actually. Reading the room, there may still be some burning questions, so please do. Our kind of guests will still be here, so please do, if you want to continue that conversation. We do have a little bit of time before the piano gets wheeled out and we get thrown out of this room. Please do take a brochure at the door if you haven't already done so. There are a number of Stop Ecocide International events over the coming days, and we would love to see you at those. And please do take inspiration from the music and the voices that you have heard at this event this afternoon. And remember, Mindahi has said, we need to take over less and take care more. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.